In this industry, you cannot place your trust on everyone.
Either I jump now or walk away from this dream forever.
Do you think iPhone images are sufficient?
You never know if you can trust someone until you actually meet them and see how they work.
You think a certain agency has the best interest of you in their mind, but they actually don't.
One thing that a lot of models don't do is being relevant with their content.
I know we're getting into that little gray area.
At the end of the day, an agency is a business and it's in their best interest to make money for the agency.
Is the follower count more important or the quality of the content?
And I think a lot of the risk with actually jumping into a creative career like modeling full-time.
What's the idea of that so much money? What's the number?
You cannot be comparing yourself because your genetics are different from another person's.
Pleasure having you today with us, and I would love for you to talk about your story. Like, how did you get into modeling? Because let's face it, it's not an easy profession to crack, at least from the research that I've done. So I would love to know, like, how did you get into it?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. So I actually got into modeling in college. I started off by attending my university fashion show casting call. They have an annual fashion show where once a year students design outfits and they put them on the runway. So I had always had this dream of modeling since I was a kid, but I had always thought of it as something that was so far away, something like only celebrities do. But when my university had a casting call, I thought it was a no-brainer to go out for it. And I walked the show and got some pretty professional looking images from it. And I ended up using that to start crafting my portfolio. And from there, I started submitting to agencies, and that's kind of how it got started.
No, that's amazing. I know off camera you told me that you had a full-time job, right? Which you decided to quit and then you got into modeling. And I think that's amazing because, again, I don't see a lot of people doing it. And I think the whole point of this podcast, or like one of the goals we have, is actually to create more awareness about unconventional career paths, right? Because now there are so many options, but again, it's like that constant juggle between trying to balance your 9 to 5 with your side hustles and your passions. So at what point did you make that decision that, okay, something that I want to do full time and I'm gonna go all out?
Yeah. So there was one point in my full-time job where I realized that I was getting all of these modeling bookings, but I had to turn them down to do a full-time job that wasn't really fulfilling me. And so I created a plan with my modeling agents, and I said, over the next 3 months, I'm going to work really hard on getting my portfolio to the level where it needs to be in order to go full-time. And after that, I pulled the plug and just decided it was now or never. And I think with modeling, it's interesting because there's kind of an age limit for when you can crack into the industry. I mean, it's a lot easier to crack in when you're in your 20s or earlier than it is when you're in your 30s. And so for me, it was kind of a now or never moment where it was either I jump now or walk away from this dream forever.
I like how you mentioned that you had a plan, right? You had a concrete plan before you got into it. And I think a lot of people lack that, right? So how did you get connected to that agency? And also, and another thing I would like to say from the research that I have done is that in this industry, you cannot place your trust on everyone, including a lot of agencies, right? So I would love to know that process of finding an agency that you can trust, finding an agent that you can trust. How did that went?
I think it's a lot of trial and error. You never know if you can trust someone until you actually meet them and see how they work, especially if you're new to the industry. So I think I had applied to a few, but I had seen that this one was, maybe the right fit for me because they were in the area. So it was a location thing. It was also the type of models they were working with and the type of work they were doing. And so I set up a meeting. And at first they actually rejected me. They said, you have potential, but we want to see some more work from you. We want to see you, put in a little effort first. And so I took their advice and I worked on that. And the second time around, I applied maybe 3 months later again. And the second time around, they actually accepted me. And they said, we see all of these these bookings for you. This is what we see. And so it was kind of that alignment of goals that led me to believe that they could be the right fit for me at that time.
Well, that makes sense. So tell me more about what was your first big job or campaign and how did you land it? I'm always really excited to hear those big success stories.
I think my first dream job was Kohl's. I'd always, when I was younger, seen these websites when you're shopping online for clothes. And I'd seen these models and I thought that would be my absolute dream job. And so the way I landed it, actually, I just got an email from my agents one day. It was a direct booking. The client had seen my portfolio on the agency website and they reached out to the agent and said, or the agent pitched me, but I just got an email from my agency saying that I'd booked it and I had to go and shoot the next week.
No, that's awesome. So, what's the first step someone who wants to get into modeling can take to become a model, but maybe they don't have the contacts or they don't have a lot of connections in the industry. Like, what would you say is a good first step or a good second step to get into it?
I definitely think you need to be comfortable taking digitals of yourself. These can be iPhone digitals, just you in a tight, form-fitting black outfit against a white wall or outside, very simple background. Have a friend take these images of you, and you can submit those to agencies. Once you get in touch with an agent, they will be able to tell you more directly and more give you a more personalized plan on what works for you and how you should be working on your development in the industry.
And let's say if I when I was doing my research, I read a lot about if you are in a big city, like if you're in New York, you're in LA, or maybe even Chicago, you have more resources. There are more options. So it's an advantage being in these places. But let's say if someone is from a small town, right, and they don't have a lot of access to different agencies or brands, then how do they navigate through those complexities?
Yes, for sure. I've definitely seen a lot of models who are, still in high school in their hometown and they're breaking into the industry. And the way they do it is by having their small town be close to a big market. So a lot of people will be in New Jersey and they commute to New York, or someone would be in maybe a small town in Ohio and they can commute to Chicago. But I think having that access to be able to travel to a big city is very important because a lot of the agencies are in these cities, a lot of the work is in these markets, and so you do need to be able to travel to a big city in order to get that work and that access.
That makes sense. And now let's kind of talk about the portfolio because I know that's a huge part to get these deals and to get modeling work, right? So and I know that as you get established in the profession and as you have more and more experience, you also get to uh, know about the nuances and you're able to incorporate that into your portfolio. But as a beginner, right, what should one focus on when it comes to building their modeling portfolio?
Yes. It depends a lot on your look. And this is where agents come in and they can actually tell you what your look is, what the market that you're going to be working in is, and what sort of images you need in your portfolio. A lot of times they will recommend photographers you need to work with as well, and the exact shoots and outfits you need to be wearing. So if you're more of a commercial model, you need more happy, bright photos. If you're in New York doing high fashion, then you need more of those kind of pictures, more editorial, black and white. So it's a lot of depending on who you are as a model, what your look is, and what market you want to be in.
That makes sense. And I know you briefly spoke about it that, you always don't need a professional photographer, especially when you're starting out. You can just click pictures in your iPhone, right? But to get recruited or to get to become part of these agencies, do you think iPhone images are sufficient, or like is there a particular way that you should do them or that you should capture yourself?
For sure. I think there's a big distinction between digitals and portfolio. So for your digitals, these are just very basic images, and these can be done on the iPhone. A lot of agencies do accept iPhone images for them for the basic digitals that when you're just starting out. On the other hand, portfolio needs to be professionally done. So for your portfolio, usually models will work with a selection of photographers that their agency has set out for them, and those will be very professional.
And what is the difference between being signed with an agency versus freelancing as a model?
Yeah, for sure. So both have a lot of different pros and cons. I think if you want to make it far in the industry, the bottom line is you should be with an agent because they have access to a lot of the biggest clients. They know how to negotiate the contracts for you and get you the best deals. If you do want to do it more as a hobby, then freelancing is what a lot of models choose to go with. There are a lot less restrictions, which is why a lot of models prefer to freelance. But I do think that if you want to go actually far and work with big clients, an agency is your best bet.
What you're saying is that if a freelancer reaches out to a big brand like Macy's, for instance, they might not hear back, so they have to go through an agent.
A lot of the big brands do recruit models through agencies because they know that's where they're going to get the best client, the best models. The models will be vetted and trained, and so the best brands do go through agencies.
And how do you identify whether an agency is actually um, like safe versus one that's just trying to take advantage of you?
Yes, I do have a few red flags that I can tell you about. Um, the first one is when an agency asks for money up front. A lot of agencies do require you to pay an annual marketing fee. They do require you to invest in your portfolio. So these are all okay for agencies to ask for. But if they're asking for you to pay them specifically for things like headshots or, a subscription for the year, that's usually not a good sign. Another thing to look at is the agency's Instagram. You need to look at their Instagram and make sure that they have actual models and they're tagging the models. The models actually follow the agency page. That's how you know they're legit. You also want to make sure that the agency's Instagram is posting actual client work and not just test shoots or portfolio shoots. If they're posting client work and they're tagging the brands that these models have worked with, then you know that they actually have clientele and they're going to get you work as well.
Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. Um, is it worth paying to be listed on different model platforms like there's models.com or different casting networks?
So agencies do get you onto casting networks. Most reputable agencies do have a platform on casting networks, and you will get free access to it. I don't think that you necessarily need to pay for casting networks if you're with an agency because they will already get you the projects through there. With models.com, I know a lot of professional models do get onto models.com, and again, that's done through an agency. Apart from that, I don't think it's necessarily helpful to get onto those websites just because, as I said, the best clients aren't sourcing from those websites. They are sourcing through agencies. So I don't think it necessarily can be very helpful. A lot of those websites also don't have the best clients on there. So it might not even be the safest option or most profitable option to list yourself on those websites.
So, I'll tell you something. I was watching this video on YouTube where there were a couple of models just talking about their experiences, that how sometimes uh, you go through an agency and you sign a contract with them, but how important it is to read that contract fully and know the ins and outs of it, because sometimes they can exploit you. Like there's a model who mentioned that you think a certain agency has the best interest of you in their mind, but they actually don't, right? So, and I know we're getting into that little gray area, so yeah, but what should new aspiring models know about contracts, agencies, negotiations?
Yeah, it's extremely important to read every contract you sign. At the end of the day, an agency is a business and it's in their best interest to make money for the agency while also keeping the model's interests at heart. So it's definitely important to read through all the different ways that their compensation is, how they're making compensation off of you. A lot of the times it's a small commission from your booking. Sometimes it can be more than that. It's also important to look through the different restrictions that they place on whether the agency contract is exclusive, whether you can work with other markets, whether you can, book jobs yourself, um, whether you're allowed to be in touch with clients yourself. A lot of the times the agency contract doesn't let you do that. And so it's important to know all of that and be mindful of that when you are interacting with people in the industry.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I would like us to talk about branding and social media also as a model, because these days, if you have a certain number of followers, if you have a really good social media, you tend to get more opportunities, or brands or agencies are more inclined towards working with you. So how can models build their personal brand to attract more work? Like, what kind of content they can put out?
Yeah. So I think one thing that a lot of models don't do is being relevant with their content and posting, very relevant, up to date images of themselves. Another thing that's important is to show your personality, because everyone checks your social media these days, whether that's clients, your friends, people you're working with in the future. Everyone is checking your social media, and your social media is linked on a lot of agency websites too. So it's important to show your personality and what's beyond your portfolio. So if you're interested in, horseback riding, for example, that's important to show on your Instagram. If you're interested in, baking, that's important to show as well. It really helps you stand out from the other models who could have a similar portfolio, who have worked with the same photographer. So a social media can be an incredible tool to really stand out and show your personality. What makes you different? Why should they book you?
So, is the follower count more important, or the quality of the content? Because the number of followers can also be manipulated in a lot of ways. So, how do agencies or brands track the metrics, like whether these are authentic followers, or y y yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think when it comes to seeing if they're authentic followers, that's come down to engagement. I know a lot of people do buy followers, but I think it's pretty obvious when you look at someone's engagement to tell how authentic those followers are. When it comes to how important the number of followers are, I think it doesn't matter, but it can help. Um, Having a low follower count isn't necessarily going to go against you, but if there's a brand that specifically wants social media content from you as well, and then it goes more into influencer and modeling territory, then a high follower count can be helpful. A lot of runway models don't put a lot of emphasis on their social media, and they have very few followers, which works for them well. But if you do want to brand yourself through social media, consistently posting about yourself and your interests, what your hobbies are, your worldview, that can definitely help you stand out from a branding perspective.
And now, coming to the process of actually like reaching out to photographers and the right stylist or the casting directors, what are some of the best practices to reach out to them, especially as a new model, if you are not signed by an agency?
That's an interesting question. I think a lot goes on Instagram these days. So if you're not signed, just reaching out to a photographer via DMs can definitely be a helpful tool. Reaching out and saying, I love your work. I would love to work with you sometime. Even asking, what are your rates, or, what's your process like? What sort of pictures do you like to shoot? Or even saying that you love a specific thing that they've done before can really help your message stand out.
Now let's talk about the money side of the things, because I know that for a lot of people, including you, it's a way to generate money, because you don't have your full-time job, so you're kind of relying on modeling to make money. As a new model, or even someone who is a year or 2 years into modeling, right, what are some of the realistic income expectations to have? Because I see a lot of people saying, oh, if you become a model, you're gonna make so much money. But what is that? What's the idea of that so much money? What's the number?
So the number depends on the type of modeling that you're doing. if you're doing runway modeling, you're getting a few $100s per show. And from that, your agency will take a commission. So I'd say runway modeling, high fashion modeling is probably the most glamorized type of modeling, but also the lowest paying one. Then we have fashion e-commerce. For those, you're getting a few thousand per day. Um, so that's probably the mid tier. And then we have commercials and the campaigns, which are the most lucrative because you're getting paid not only for your time and your skills, but for that content to be used. So this can be anywhere from 5 to even 6 figures if you're an established model just for one shoot. And you're getting paid for that ad to be on a billboard for a year. You're getting paid for that ad to be on a billboard in another country. You're getting paid for your ad to run on TV for a year. So the duration and where it will be played is where a lot of models make a lot of money.
But one thing that I get from what you're saying is that it's not like a 9 to 5 where you have certain amount of money coming in every month. It depends on the project. It depends on when you're getting the project and whether or not you are getting the right project. Because I see after a point of time you might not say yes to all the projects, right? So in that case, what are some of the smart financial goals that you can set for yourself as a model? Like how can you financially plan in a certain way that if for a month you're not getting any gig or you're not able to do a certain gig or number of gigs, then how do you like sustain through that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think a lot of the risk with actually jumping into a creative career like modeling full time comes with the instability of money and the fact that you don't always know what your next gig is going to be. A lot of times in these industries as well, everything happens, the week before, 2 weeks before. And so your next few months aren't always planned out financially. So I think the best thing that you need to do is, first of all, not live paycheck to paycheck. You cannot be relying on, next month's income to pay next month's bills. You definitely need to have a lot of savings before you go into it, just in case you don't book anything a month. You need to be able to pay off all your bills in that month. A lot of models also have other jobs that they do on the side. For example, social media can be a good source of income for a lot of models. Some, work as a bartender. Some have very cool jobs that they work as well. So I think a lot of models do have a balance of other things that will help them financially. And especially if they choose another side job that is flexible with the hours, that can be a great pairing to make modeling a full-time job.
I like how you mentioned about social media because with the rise of social media now, a lot of people are able to get brand deals, right? They're able to get endorsements. I would love for you to talk a little bit more about that. Like, how can models create multiple streams of income using social media?
Yeah, for sure. I think with social media, there are now so many ways to create multiple streams of income, whether that's selling an offer that you already have that has nothing to do with social media and you're using social media to market it. It could also be through brand deals. And this is where modeling and social media have a lot of overlap. Um, if you're branding yourself well on social media, a brand is going to want to reach out to you to not only model for them, but to post those modeling images on your page and get them more traction. So this is one of the ways that social media can help models in getting more bookings and more expensive bookings as well.
That's a valid point, and I think that's where your followers also come into place, right? Because if you're constantly posting different forms of content, then your engagement will automatically increase from there on.
For sure. And your engagement rate is definitely mentioned on your agency page. If you're a creator and you have an agent or a manager, your engagement rate, the number of people who view your story, the number of people who are liking, commenting, sharing, saving, all of those numbers are there for clients to look at. And so I think that also plays into how you can see what followers are authentic and which ones aren't.
You know, this is my favorite part of the conversation because I feel that for models especially, their appearance plays a huge part, right? Like their appearance, the way they conduct themselves, their style plays a huge part in whether they'll eventually get successful at it or not. how difficult do you think mentally and emotionally it can be to be constantly thinking about your appearance and your style and the way you should conduct yourself? Because it's not easy, right? It comes with a lot of prep work. And sometimes doing so much prep work and focusing so much on one aspect of yourself, or multiple aspects of yourself at the same time, can really take a toll on your mental and emotional health. So how do you like maintain that balance?
Yeah. I always say that I didn't get into modeling because I thought I was pretty. I wanted to get into modeling, and so I really had to double down on my wellness and my skincare, my hair care, everything in order to get there. And so it's a lot of work. There are a lot of moving parts that you need to take care of, from your skin, your hair, to how you're sleeping, exercising, eating. There are a lot of moving parts. And it can sometimes be a little overwhelming to make sure that everything is looking good. Um, there it's easy to compare yourself in the industry and see that someone else has a better health routine or someone else has nicer skin or hair than you, but I think at the end of the day you just have to eliminate that. And I think this is true for every industry, where you cannot be comparing yourself because your genetics are different from another person's, and you can't be comparing yourself and trying to get something that just isn't in your genetic makeup.
I like that because you cannot compare yourself to the other person. They might have had different advantages and a different journey altogether. So you should compare yourself to where you were.
I agree. And I think another thing with the appearance is that you don't want to be looking like other people either, because you don't stand out then. When when you're in an industry that's so focused on appearance, having something that looks different is just going to help you stand out a little more. So comparing yourself to people really doesn't take you anywhere in the industry.
What do you think is the toughest part of being a model?
I would definitely say um the irregularity is one of the biggest challenges that I have had to get over. The uncertainty of not knowing what my bookings are going to look like next month or for the next few months, the rest of the year. My career could slow down or it could take off, and I have absolutely no idea about any of that. So I think the best thing that you can do at that point is to control what you can. Try and increase your portfolio, work on your social media, work on all of your other projects, and do what you can. But I think the uncertainty of everything is definitely one of the biggest challenges with this career.
Speaking about the industry evolution, because things are changing with time, things are evolving, and I think the emergence of artificial intelligence is affecting all the industries, not just one industry, but all the industries. Um, in today's time, right, what modeling niches or categories are in high demand? Because I know there is fitness, there's e-commerce, there's commercial, like you mentioned.
hmm I think all are equally in demand as they were a few years ago, to my understanding. I think AI hasn't yet gotten to the level where they can replace models, because I think it is pretty obvious right now. In a few years, maybe we will get to a point where it's not obvious, whether it's an AI model or a real model. But I am hopeful that because it's a people-focused industry, that humans still crave that human connection. They want to see how clothes look on someone who's a real human being. They don't want to see clothes on someone who was generated by a computer. That's not realistic, and it doesn't show them how it's going to look on themselves. So I am hopeful that because modeling is a people-based career, that AI will not take it away very soon.
No, that makes sense, and I hope not. Because I could visibly tell the difference between AI generated pictures and yeah, we tried that. So yeah, it's very fresh in my mind. But anyway, um, there's a common, and we spoke briefly about this. There's a common perception that some modeling agencies do not always prioritize the well-being of the talent, right? have you, and genuinely, right, have you felt like you were being treated more like a product than a person? And like, what are some of the red flags that that an aspiring model should watch out?
Yeah, I've actually been extremely grateful to work with agents who have put my health first. They've never asked me to, change my appearance or lose weight or anything like that. And I'm very grateful that they have treated me like a real person and not like a product. But there are definitely some agencies that I've heard about that, will ask models to lose an obscene amount of weight, to be extremely skinny, and that can be very unhealthy for models, especially for the younger ones who are just starting out in the career. And so a big red flag is definitely when a model asks you to do anything unhealthy. If it's something that doesn't align with your health, I think that's a huge red flag and you should stay away from that. But unfortunately, that is the reality of the industry. Runway models do need to have they do need to have certain measurements. And so unfortunately, it is pretty rampant. But I think trying to find the right agents who will not push that on you is a very important thing, especially for younger models.
Right, and I have also heard some models voice out that they have seen photographers crossing boundaries, like physical boundaries, and touching them inappropriately, which is absolutely wrong. But it does happen, and that's also one side of the reality. What's the best way, especially like as a new model, how can you assert your boundaries? How can you set your boundaries, especially if you have already signed the contract with the agency or you're working with the photographer?
Yeah, for sure. I think one important thing is to never be on set alone with a photographer. Make sure there's always at least one other person. The rule of three is to at least have three people there always, whether that's a friend, a makeup artist, a hairstylist, someone who's in charge of lighting. It's important to at least have three people on set at all times. You're a lot less likely to run into any issues then. Um, Asking a photographer if it's one of your first photo shoots and it's not set up by an agency, asking the photographer if you can bring a friend or your mom or something is definitely a good way to test the waters. If a photographer immediately says no, that's a red flag and you should stay away from that.
Like, I feel that in order to do well in any profession, especially modeling or acting, right, it's very important to have a very strong support system, whether it's mentors or family support. That is really important. um in your case, right, how supportive was your family or people around you?
Yeah, coming from a South Asian household, it's not very common to have family who's supportive of, their child going into a creative industry, one that doesn't have as much job security as a regular traditional career. And I've been extremely grateful to have family that has supported my career, that has been very, emotionally supportive of everything that I'm doing. And that's been a huge help. I think it was definitely a surprise to them, especially coming from, a very educational heavy background to going into a full-time corporate job in consulting and dropping all of that to pursue a creative career. It definitely came as a shock to them, but I think they've been very supportive and I'm very grateful for that.
And for I like, you were fortunate to have that support from your family, right? But a lot of models are not that fortunate, right? They lack family support. So in that case, like, are there certain organizations or groups that they can join to find that support? Like, does that exist in the industry? Because I know it can be tough, right? Because it's a competitive industry and everyone is just competing with each other.
Yeah, I don't know about any industry specific organizations for that, but there are a lot of communities, community organizations in your city that you can join to find people in the industry and the space. I think something that was very helpful for me was to actually show my parents the amount of money that there is in this career and to show them that these are the bookings I'm getting. This is the work that I'm putting into it. It's not just something I'm doing for fun. And showing them that there is a clear career trajectory forward and this is how much money I make per job. that definitely helped to gain their support. And as they saw, it was actually a lucrative career path and a viable option as well.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, I think that's the way it is in a lot of South Asian families and in most of the families. Like, what your parents want is they want their child to be safe, number one. And second, they want, their child to be successful. So if you can actually have a conversation with them and properly explain them those things instead of getting really rebellious, then that does help a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think that showing them the tangible successes that you could be having will help. And I think South Asian families want to know you're working hard for what you're getting too. And so showing them all the hard work that you're putting in as well can be very helpful when you're navigating those conversations.
Right. Like, how did you approach that conversation with your parents or your family, like when you were starting out?
I was open. I was open with how I was feeling with my corporate job and with my goals in modeling. And I said, I think I'm going to go full time. And at first, they were a little skeptical, for sure, as they should have been. But I did show them all of I basically showed them the proof of what I could have to gain in this industry. I showed them the amount of money that I would be making. I showed them the type of jobs that I would be getting. And I also gave them proof of how I know how to navigate the industry in a way that is safe. And I think all of those together really helped show them that it is a viable option to pursue and that it could be a safe and lucrative career path.
No, that's amazing. And if for again going back for an aspiring model, like things can be very challenging. So what are three pieces of advice that you'll offer to someone who is just starting out in the industry?
Interesting. Three pieces. Okay. Um, don't be afraid to invest in yourself. You need to have some money to invest in your portfolio. It is a big investment to get started in the modeling industry, just like with any career. Whether you're paying for an education, you're working hard during the summer at an internship, for a regular job. Similarly, in modeling, you do need to invest in your portfolio. So having that money set aside for it is important. That's my first thing. The second thing would be to get an agency. That will be a huge help with mentorship, with finding clients. They will, if you're lucky, they will basically help you through your career and be your biggest support system. The third thing would be don't sell yourself short with working on bookings that don't align with you. If a booking does not align with your values or your worth, if it's not paying you enough, do not accept it because that's going to lower your value in the industry.
Wow, that's interesting. But don't you think it can be a little tough if you're starting out? Because I know a lot of people who would just say yes to everything that comes their way, and I know that's the wrong mindset. You should not. But especially like if you are in a tricky situation, you don't have family support, you don't have a lot of savings, how can you like avoid those situations?
You need to have savings going into it. um, to get started, you have to have a professional portfolio and you have to invest in it. And I think it's similar to saying that you're going into investment banking, for example, without an education. It just doesn't work that way. You need to have the savings to invest in education, and then the next trajectory is getting a job. And so you do actually need to invest a couple of thousands into your portfolio when you're starting out.
I think you've answered it quite well that you need to have savings so that you can invest into your portfolio. And I'm glad you mentioned a couple of $1,000 because I was thinking, and I think a lot of people might think, oh, it's just a couple of like just four, five, 600, whatever. But you said it's a couple of $1,000, right? So is there like a number? And when you are working towards building this modeling portfolio, what are some of the things that you should have? Like what kind of looks should you have, or like what kind of photographers or videographers should you work with?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's very specific to the model and it's very specific to the market you're in as well. And I keep saying this, but an agency is going to give you the best advice on your look, the photographers you need to work with, and the even the types of images that you need. Do you need outdoor images? Do you need to be wearing a bathing suit? Do you need to be in very high fashion outfits? Or maybe you need to have crazy hair and makeup done. It's all about your look and the market that you're in. So I can give you an example of if someone's in New York and they want to do high fashion runway modeling and they need to do editorial modeling, that's when you're going to have the very crazy hair and makeup. You're going to have the high fashion black and white looks, and you're going to have maybe a little less of the fun product shoots.
Interesting. No, that's a very helpful advice, honestly. I was looking at your Instagram and I saw you mentioned names of a couple of agencies there. Um, like if one signs up, then they get recommended or something like that. I saw that. So I mean, I think that was really smart because again, it's a way to generate more income. So just going back to that topic, right? You mentioned about brand deals, endorsements, but how do you like as a model, like, is there like a different way to reach out to these brands, or you just simply get connected to an agency and they bring you those opportunities?
Yeah, so when you are with an agency, they will bring you the opportunities. A lot of the times the agency has a huge clientele and they will either pitch you to the agency or I mean, sorry, the agency will either pitch you to the client or the client will kind of pick you from the agency from their website. If you're not working with an agency, then I do know a lot of models reach out via Instagram or through their network, getting in touch with the designer. So there are two different ways based on whether you're signed with an agency or not.
Interesting. Um, if you could go back in time, right, like a year back or 2 years back, what are some of the things that you would change about your career or the way you did things at that point of time?
Yes, for sure. I think it's very similar to the advice that I gave new models a few minutes ago. I would definitely have invested more in high quality portfolio materials earlier. I think I took a lot of time trying to shortcut the investment and working with photographers who were my friends, and photographers who weren't going to charge me a lot of money, but that just slowed down how fast I was going to get clients. And then I think I also would have not accepted all the different bookings that were coming to me. I would have been a lot more selective if I could do it again, because a lot of the bookings took a lot of time and I didn't get a lot out of them. And like I said earlier, it does show your value in the industry. The type of clients you're working with does add to your reputation. And so if you are accepting a lot of lower ticket offers, that is going to lower your value. So if I could do it again, I would definitely invest a lot more hard in my portfolio and I would be a lot more selective with the bookings that I took.
Well, that was amazing, and I think that's really bold. It's a very bold point of view, because you just if you it's important to first, number one, know your value and like what you bring to the table, and have that confidence in yourself that okay, maybe this opportunity is does not align with me and this is something that I should not do. But I think it comes with a lot of analyzing yourself and a lot of confidence for sure. Well, this was amazing having a conversation with you. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I love talking to you about all of this.